Well, behind me is the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, where Pope Francis has decided he wants to be buried. Now, no pope in the last few hundred years has been buried here at this ancient Roman basilica, but Pope Francis had a very strong devotion to this place. He would come to the basilica before and after every foreign trip to pray in front of an ancient icon of the Virgin Mary, the Salus Populi Romani, which is linked to the protection and the health of the Roman people. Pope Francis in his last testament said he always felt under the protection of Mary. Before each meeting, I was told by a Vatican official, would go in front of a statue to pray of the Virgin Mary before he would meet heads of state or bishops. So his decision to come here is very significant. It shows his devotion to Mary and also his desire for a simple burial. He said that he wants his tomb to simply be engraved with Franciscus. No adornments. Again, Francis in death, showing he continues to reform the papacy through his emphasis on simplicity and humility.
One of the top candidates to succeed Francis is the man who served as his second in command, the current Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. From visiting war-torn Ukraine to brokering a deal that saw the Holy See mend ties with China, the 70-year-old Italian is seen as a skilled diplomat and a conciliatory figure who could appeal to both conservatives and progressives. His election, however, could lead to clashes with the Trump administration as he has rebuked the U.S. president's Gaza plan. Another top contender is Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Basungo of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A strong defender of democracy and human rights, Ambongo has been cardinal since 2019.
Felice, cioè sono consapevole.
I am happy. I am aware of the responsibility this appointment brings.
That responsibility has seen him stand up to warlords and corrupt leaders, becoming a respected moral voice. The 65-year-old is also the leader of a massive local church of more than 7 million people and represents the growing church in Africa. A surprise candidate may be Cardinal Robert Prevost from the United States. America's global influence has made electors shy away from choosing a U.S. Pope in the past, but the 69-year-old from Chicago spent many years working in Peru before leading the powerful Vatican office for bishop appointments, and he shouldn't be ruled out. The top contender, though, may hail from one of the corners of the globe where the church has been growing, and few cardinals are as charismatic as Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, often dubbed the Asian Francis.
We believe that Jesus is alive, and he was born and he ministered, he died, and rose from the dead in Asia.
The 67-year-old led the church's charitable arm as well as the Vatican Department of Evangelization, and he may be well positioned as the church pivots towards parts of the world where it's expanding. Still, it's impossible to say which, if any, of these candidates will be chosen. If there's anything we can glean from past conclaves, it's that usually the favorites don't get picked.
From St. Peter's Basilica to Notre Dame in Paris to Catholic churches around the world, resounding bells brought the news.
Carissimi fratelli e sorelle.
Dear brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis.
Almost immediately, crowds began gathering to mourn, to pray, and join together with fellow Catholics. The death of Pope Francis started a timeline of papal transition established over centuries. His funeral and then a 9-day mourning period known as Novendiales. During this time, the faithful will be able to travel to the Vatican to see the Pope's body lying in state. When Pope John Paul II passed away in 2005, Hundreds of thousands traveled to St. Peter's to pay their respects. Abbeys and convents sent representatives. Trainloads of mourners came from his native Poland. Sometimes the lines to get into the basilica were miles long. But as much as events will follow as tradition demands, there will be changes. Pope Francis said he didn't want to be buried in the crypts beneath St. Peter's, as most other popes have been, but in one of Rome's major churches.
I want to be buried in Santa Maria Maggiore. I always went there on Sunday mornings when I was in Rome. There's a very strong connection.
One tradition is certain to hold. Heads of state, heads of government, and royalty from around the world will gather to honor and remember Pope Francis, even some who perhaps didn't always agree with his teachings. After the funeral, the work of choosing a new pope begins, as cardinals from all over the world will arrive for the conclave. It's an election process cloaked in tradition and secrecy, conclave meaning with the key, the procedure by which the cardinals are locked away in the Sistine Chapel to begin voting. Anyone violating the secrecy of the voting risks excommunication. Inconclusive ballots are burned with a chemical which produces black smoke, but when the next pope is picked, another chemical is used producing white smoke. The signal to all that the spiritual head of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics has been chosen, with the words echoing from St. Peter's balcony.
Habemus Papam.
Habemus Papam, Latin for we have a pope, the way popes, including Pope Francis himself, have been introduced for centuries. Jim Bitterman, CNN.
Yusuf.
Buonasera, Santo Padre.
Buonasera, come stai?
For the last 18 months of his life, this was Pope Francis's nightly ritual. At 8 p.m., a call to war-torn Gaza.
Cosa avete mangiato oggi?
Del pollo, le ali, il resto del polli, il resto del pollo, la salita, che tal, Santo Padre?
Buon Natale, tante grazie.
From the third day of the war until 2 days before his death, Pope Francis spoke nightly with the Holy Family Church, forging a special wartime bond that priests and parishioners of Gaza's only Catholic church won't ever forget.
Daily, he called us and to ask for peace, to pray for peace, and to give the blessing for all Gazan people and for all the Palestinians.
كان بيحكي معنا بلهفة الأب على أبنائه، بيسأل عن تفاصيل حياتنا اليومية، بيسأل عن كل مجريات الأحداث اللي بتصير، بتطمن علينا كيف إحنا، كيف نشعر، أكلنا اليوم.
The relationship drew the Pope closer to the plight of Gaza's civilian population and informed his outspoken criticism of Israel's attacks. Yesterday, children were bombed, the Pope decried in December. This is cruelty. This is not war. I want to say this because it touched my heart. The Pope also regularly called out rising anti-Semitism and demanded the release of Israeli hostages, including in his final address on Easter Sunday, in which he called for a ceasefire one last time. Inside Gaza's Holy Family Church, one of the many communities Pope Francis touched gathers to pray for his soul and for the world to see them as Francis did.
أنا رسالتي للعالم إنه ينظروا إلى غزة بنفس العيون التي كان ينظر منها البابا فرنسيس، عيون الحقيقة، عيون الحق، عيون العدالة، عيون السلام، عيون المحبة.
From this small church in Gaza, a prayer against the scourge of indifference, which Pope Francis called the greatest sickness of our time. Jeremy Diamond, CNN, Jerusalem.